Back again, the podcast, Conversations with C&C, the podcast where we chop it up. We have deep dialogue, transparent talks, and just congruent conversations. And just, I guess it's a representation of our private convos, but just with a camera on. I go by the name of Claude Murray, but you can call me C. I'm an integrative therapist as well as a clinical supervisor. But most importantly, I'm a father. And this is the podcast where we chop it up and speak about themes and topics that are connected to the three pillars of race, culture, and therapy. And we're always going to use the 3 E's at some point during the session. And those 3 E's are exploration, where we explore together. We'll share some of our experiences where appropriate and share some of our expertise. So this is the pod. I'm with my guy, the distinguished Mr. Miyagi. We called him Coach Carter in the last session. Phil Jackson, Alex Ferguson, Jurgen Klopp, Mourinho, the lecturer of lecturers, a good friend, a solid brother, and someone that I look to, and we just have this mutual connection. And so just want to introduce you to my guy, the guy of guys, who I call Doc. I'll let him introduce himself. My guy, blessings, Doc. We're in the building.
Yes, thank you, my brother, as always. My name is Carl Barge, psychotherapist and lecturer, clinical supervisor, father to, I can say now, two adult females, young women who are, they are a testament to me. Yeah, and I believe that that is that's the gift. That's the gift. And even though my eldest daughter is 27, I still see her as a little girl. Sometimes, at times, sometimes, but at times I can just see that little girl who is who's grown up to such a beautiful woman. But happy to be with you. Happy to have our guest today, Chris. Thank you for coming, sir. So good to be here.
I've heard so many parents who have older children say, no matter their age,
I can confirm it.
My baby or my little, and the son or daughter might be in their 50s, but still, you're still my child. So hearing you say that,
And unless I forget my grandson, Caleb, he's brought such joy to all of our lives. And also just seeing her as a mom, a young mom herself. It's so rewarding, man.
So Chris, we got this running joke, myself and G, about Doc. He talks about being a granddad, being a father of older children. But the hairline is intact. And that's one of my goals, to have a hair. I don't know if I don't know if I can go forward, but at least I can maintain.
Hold on.
Hold on, dear brother, for your life. Yeah, I will. But great to have Chris with us. Who came in with the green jumper to match. It was unintentional, but the synchronicity. And we always say we're very intentional who we have on the green couch. It's the front room, it's the living room, and speaking with G, who you've seen on the pod, who you always hear behind the scenes. He was just speaking about Chris, and we had a great conversation, myself and Chris, and just the phenomenal things that Chris is doing in the community, and the challenges and things that he's overcome and where he's working towards. I just thought that it would be a great fit. And we spoke about nutrition in the episode, and just health and stuff that Chris has spoken about on the phone. So I just want to say thank you for being with us. Really appreciated.
Thanks so much for having me.
Got to do your bio, man. We got to introduce you correctly, man. So Chris is a performance coach. He's a keynote speaker, and he's a mental health advocate. has a degree in the field of social policy, is a former professional undefeated boxer, and for over 10 years, Chris has worked with high performers in the fields of law, sales, recruitment, and corporate leadership to help them identify well-being practices and mindsets which can support their busy professional lives while looking after their mental and physical health. Holistic work there taking place. Chris also volunteers in his time at Carney's Community Youth Charity in South London, supporting young people through boxing, coaching, and targeted youth work and employment training. I want to big up George down at Carney's. We've not met for a long time, but me and George connected many years ago in my introductory into working with young people, and to see what they're doing now is phenomenal. So, you know, and then myself and Chris realised we have a mutual friend. So, yeah, there's always, just that connection, man. But no, as I say, thank you, man. And what I want to do, we always do something called a TC, a temperature check, just for the listeners and viewers to know where we are in the here and now. Right. But ultimately for us to know where we are in the here and now in this moment. It's almost like grounding. Yeah. So I'm going to start with you, Doc.
Yeah.
How you doing in the here and now?
As you said that word, that was what was in my mind. Grounded. I feel grounded. I feel grateful.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that we get to do something and invite people along to share with the viewers, you know, some of the tremendous work that people are doing in the community, you know, grassroots stuff, you know, the mainstream stuff, and you know, that's so rewarding for us because, you know, so many times, I think I've said it before, I'll say it again, when it comes to our gifting, sometimes we think our gifting is for, it's you know, I have this gift, it's for me, but our gift is not, it's for everybody else. We have to give that gift away, because if you don't give it away, then it becomes stagnant. And then I think that's when you get those hearts that are not really pure, and it can be deceptive and all other things, you know, we won't get into. But yeah, I feel grounded and blessed to be here, and to hear Chris speak today. Yeah.
How you doing in the here and now, Chris, man?
I'm actually feeling really positive. Like, I'm encouraged. And I'm encouraged for lots of reasons. I think I'm encouraged because you guys are so warm and welcoming. I'm encouraged because this has happened because I met G.
Yeah.
And I met G because I did a project with Alf. And I feel like both those things were not kind of profit orientated or promotion orientated. They were kind of passion projects or things that come naturally from the heart. And it's nice to see that when you do those things and there's no kind of immediate strategy as to why you're doing them, things have a way of working their way around, and you end up, as you say, being rewarded in many ways which you didn't anticipate. So I feel like today is a reward for just kind of going with your heart and following your interests. So yeah, and I also feel impressed with the setup. Like, I'm like, this is like, you know, very professional. So, but yeah, no, I feel super encouraged. I feel like it's a good time to be here for me.
Thank you, brother. Really appreciate that, man. In the here and now, I'm feeling reflective. And I think just reflecting about like the year thus far, and what's to come. So, but being in the moment, I'm very present. But yeah, in a reflective space and intrigued. Yeah, intrigued about like what we chop up and what comes up, and because there's I think there's power in stories, man. You Absolutely. Know, connected to what you said, like the gift is not just for us, like the fruit on the tree, like the tree doesn't benefit from the fruit. The person who picks the fruit, you know, benefits. And I just feel like, yeah, man, I feel like we're going to be blessed today, man, you know, by what Chris shares. So, yeah, man, open. open. So Chris, we start off each episode when we have a guest, you know, we ask this question: if you were in therapy, you know, had to go to see a therapist tomorrow, and, you know, keeping yourself, you know, safe, what would you share and what would you hope to get out of the session?
So I knew this question was coming.
Yeah.
And like we said on the phone, I always say to people, like, you can't expect honesty out of people if you don't put some skin in the game. So while no one listening is going to be talking back to us currently, I feel like everything that you guys stand for is being quite honest and quite vulnerable and showing that that's all right, showing that that can actually benefit people. So I'm going to share something which is relatively personal to me, which is, if I had to go to therapy tomorrow, one thing I'd be talking about would be the relationship I have with my mum, because me and her have not really spoken for like the last 9 months or so, which is very uncharacteristic. We grew up, you know, I grew up as a single parent family, very close to my mum for a long time, and then basically last November a conversation occurred which I found quite hurtful, and we've not really managed to move past it. And I'm kind of asking myself why not, or like why I can't move past it. And I think I did therapy. I've done a few stints of therapy. I said to you, Claude, on the phone. I've done some therapy, but what's interesting about this one is it's made me re-examine a lot of things, because I grew up with a lot of my friends are from single parent families. A lot of my friends are black boys from single parent families in London. And we have, I think, a very particular way of relating to our mums, which is like, she's the good one. Do you know what I mean? The dads are out there, you know, philandering, having affairs like my one did, or leaving, or being waste men or whatever, but the mums are holding it down, working double hard, going through financial strife. And I think a version of that became my kind of story. And I think sometimes disruptive events, which is what I would categorise what's happened recently, can be very difficult, but they can also be a lens through which to re-examine some of the stories that you told yourself about certain relationships. And I think that would be something that I'd appreciate some help with in terms of like breaking that down. So that would probably be what I discuss in therapy at the moment.
Chris, really appreciate your realness, man. Just you know, raw transparency, and when you speak about what mothers mean, you know, to boys, to men. So you kind of touched a little bit on childhood, and we gonna moonwalk back, MJ, and if you could let us know a song that represents childhood. When you think of this song, this takes you back to childhood, takes you back to young Chris, running around, you know, what was happening for you in a home, family, life. Yeah.
So yeah, I actually had a song in mind, but it's not really from young days. If I think back to young days, this is random, right? But I wasn't allowed to watch TV during the week. So there was no TV on in the mornings, there was no TV on in the evenings. It was only at the weekend that we got to do it. And however, the radio was on every morning. So I have quite clear memories of like, my mum was always up before me and she'd come and wake me up, and then I'd make my way to the kitchen and the radio was always be on. And it used to be Magic FM. And at some point she made the transition, I don't know when, to Classic FM, and I was a bit disappointed. Like, I don't know. I think I'd left home by then. No, I hadn't left home. I think it was, we'd moved house. But anyway, the Magic FM days, I can't remember the DJ's name, I remember his name. But Dario G, Sunshine, is a song that sticks in my memory.
Wow.
And it's not a particularly sort of famous song. I think that was around 1997 maybe, sometime around there. And I just remember that reminds me of mornings in my house. Mornings getting ready for school, mornings on the weekend. And it wasn't particularly, it's not like I loved the song, but when I had to think of like what song encapsulates like the earlier part of my life, wasn't very aware of music till I became a teenager. And then then if you ask me like what song represents my teenagers, then there's like a lot to choose from, right? There's a lot of quite important, significant songs, but you want to talk about Little Chris running around, that was what was on the radio.
So Magic FM, then the transition to classic.
Oh, mate. It says so much, doesn't it?
What was life like at that stage for you? Yeah, as little Chris, like your early years.
Well, I grew up in Balham.
Yeah.
When it was a dump.
Southwest.
I left in 1999. So my mum and dad, when they together got like a ground floor masonette, garden flat, and then that's where I grew up. And it was kind of, those early years are kind of characterized, I think, by my parents' separation, because my dad left when I was 2, still maintained a relationship with me, but left the house, and it was quite a fraught separation. There was a lot of ill feeling because he left for another woman. But what happened for me is I started off going to the local primary school, and I just kicked off when I was there. And I was like doing stuff that they'd never seen a 4 or 5-year-old do. It's like running away from home, setting fire to things, doing some quite significant violence to children around me for not necessarily obvious reasons. And in the end, I was suspended and then I was permanently excluded on the grounds that the children in the classroom were not safe to be around me, or that they just didn't have the resources to manage, because I was so unpredictable. I could just go at any moment. So that led to I was kind of stuck for a few months where my mum was trying to like juggle work and childminders and almost like homeschooling, where like no school would really take me. And then my nursery school teacher, who'd always had like a great relationship with me, who I loved, basically pleaded with the headmistress of another primary school, which was not council, so it was a private primary school, that all the things that they'd written about me were not true and that she should give me a chance. Because it turns out when you exclude a 5-year-old, or not even a 5-year-old, I think at the time I was 4.5, from mainstream education, there's a legal burden that the council has to satisfy, right? Yeah, that's right. Educational psychologists, reports, home observations. So that was what was happening. And then obviously the time they're done making their case that they shouldn't have to give you a place at school, they make you out to be a little bit of a monster, right?
Yeah.
So then it makes it really difficult without some kind of personal leg up. Because who's going to want that kid in their school, right? So luckily, this woman called Jiva, who I reconnected with on Facebook about 6 or 7 years ago, having not spoken to her for 25 years, she kind of made the case. And my mum was like really unsure how she was going to manage financially, but there kind of weren't too many other options, because like it was that, or they were going to put me in like baby Prue. And like my dad was like, well, if that's what he needs, and my mum was like, nah, absolutely not. Like, he's not going there. So so that was kind of, and then that school wasn't local, so I didn't really know anyone in my area from school. I was driven to and from school, but my mum obviously still couldn't pick me up. And so the days it was her days to pick me up, I went home with a Jamaican family. So I actually got picked up from school by, I had a classmate called Chantel and her family. So Auntie Avis and Uncle Huey used to come pick me up. And they were actually a foster family. So they had Chantel there, they had her older sister who'd left home, and then they had 3 boys, all from Jamaican background. 2 of them they all shared a mum, 2 different dads, and they were there. So my sort of Monday, Wednesday and Friday after school was going back to these guys' house, and just kind of like learning a different way of living and getting familiar with, I didn't realise it, but like essentially Jamaican culture, which I didn't have any exposure to at that stage in my life. So so my early years were like going to primary school. My improvement in my behaviour was astronomical as soon as I went to this school. stopped burning things down. I spent most of my break times and lunch times facing the wall because I was still naughty, but I wasn't that naughty. Do you know what I mean?
Like that.
Remember the wall? Do you remember that? She's like, man, and how I used to scrutinise. I used to scrutinise that wallpaper or that brickwork.
Yeah, finding dots that weren't even actually there.
Yeah.
Then you had those teachers who would be like, try to make your nose touch.
Yeah, they'd be like, look at the wall.
Yeah. So, in terms of like family dynamics, do you have like siblings?
I don't.
So it
was just me.
Just yourself?
Yeah.
And where's family from?
So my mum is actually French. So she came to this country when she was 20 years old as an au pair.
Yeah.
She grew up in Bordeaux in the south of France, but she actually grew up between Bordeaux and Casablanca because her parents moved to Morocco when she was very young. So she kind of spent time with her grandparents in France, but and then also spent time in Morocco. She went back to France when she was 19 to do her studies, hated it, didn't like it, had some health problems, and then she came to England just kind of on the spur and lived with a family, worked as an au pair, and just started from there. And then she started doing night school at Birkbeck, and that's where she got her degree from. So she kind of was working in like arts, museums, that kind of stuff. And my dad's from the Midlands, from Wolverhampton, about as unglamorous as it gets. And he came to London when he was 18, and then he lived a few different places. But yeah, they met, I think they actually met in Bristol, but then they lived a bit there and then they come to London together. So yeah, my dad's English, my mum's French.
So then what was that like? Little Chris, 3 days out of the week, Jamaican culture, Jamaican Auntie Mavis, did you say?
Aunt Avis, yeah.
Auntie Avis and Uncle Huey?
Yeah.
Yeah, what was that like?
Do you know what? You don't really realise it at the time, you know, you just adapt, right? And I've been pinging around childminders for years at that point. Like when I was really little, it was Madam Mohammed who looked after me. So I was never in a white family, frankly. Do you know what I mean? I grew up in like Muslim families, Jamaican families. So I guess I just kind of adapted to it. You know, things that I remember is you got the living room and then you got the sitting room. And the sitting room's got the plastic on.
Hey.
You know about that? So that was like, I was like, why do they not sit on these sofas?
It's
like,
Holy Grail.
I never saw no one sit on those sofas ever. We weren't allowed in that room.
That's right.
Ever.
Yeah. Some of those rooms had a key, right?
Some of them, yes.
And
I mean, it was always shut.
Yeah.
And obviously being curious at one time. And then, so I learned quickly, we don't go in that room.
Yeah.
So that I remember that. I remember plastic on the dining table, plastic napkin, plastic tablecloths. I remember the fact that Uncle Huey never said a word, ever. Pretty much, occasionally would look up and would occasionally kiss his teeth, and that was all you needed to know. So like, if Uncle Huey looked at you, you're on thin ice. If he kissed his teeth, you've broken through. Like reverse, stop doing what you're doing right now and apologise. But yeah, just I learned, you know, it wasn't kind of like wildly different, I suppose, but it was a family. You know, it was a busy house with lots of kids running around, and you know, two parents. I guess that was, you know, obviously I didn't have that in my home. My mum never remarried. She never had another partner that was like, she never lived with another partner. She never had a consistent person that was there. So it was always just me and my mum. So I guess I quite liked that. It was also a house. It had stairs in it, which to me was like, wow, this is fun. Because both my parents lived in flats. So yeah, those are some of the things I remember. Fun memories.
Yeah, I could just see you running around as you're talking, and that house sounds like there's structure and safety and like. So tell me a little bit about. So, did you get back into school and like what happened after that? Like,
yeah, it turns out I was quite bright. That's what they realised. So I did really well. So I went to a school. I clearly there's something about that primary school, or maybe at the time of my life where, you know, I think there was a lot of fallout from the divorce. I think I look at it now, and this is kind of where I try and reimagine the story about, you know, like the angel single mum. Like, she's an angel single mum and she did what she could, but it doesn't mean she was perfect, right? And like, if your husband leaves and you're torn up about it, and you're like now under like financial pressure, childcare pressure, and there's this little kid here who's just in the middle of it all, like, it's unlikely that you're not gonna put some of that onto the kid, right? It's unlikely that the kid isn't gonna detect, apart from the absence of the father, a sadness, an anger, a doubt, whatever it is, right? So I think that, you know, she did the best she could, but it's inevitable that just the change and the impact it will have had on her will have been felt by me, and that's probably what will have influenced a sense of, I think, not feeling safe or not feeling like things were okay. So then you put me in a different environment, my way of dealing with things is to weaponize. So if I'm not happy, if I'm not safe, I'm taking people out. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna go sit in a corner, I'm gonna like go to war. So I think that's what happened. And as soon as I was in a different environment where I did feel sense of safety, I flourished. Like, I was naughty, but no, I was like lippy. But I did really well. They said you should take all the exams to the selective schools. I did. My mum insisted that I only take entrance exams to state schools. My dad, who was kind of like having his hand in my education, was like, no, he should take some of the ones to the private schools. Probably like as an ego thing, because it was like, my mum was like, we can't afford it, so what's the point of him sending me to that private primary school? It almost broke her anyway. So she was like, we're not paying for education no more, because like we can't afford it, plus the fees like triple when you go from primary to secondary. But my dad leveraged, and so I ended up taking 10 different entrance exams at 11 plus. To like state schools, grammar schools, private schools, you know, selective. And I got into quite a few of them. And I got into Dulwich College, which is like about as, you know, it's like Harry Potter, and like, you know what I mean? It looks super nice. I got there with a scholarship, but, you know, I think I got a 25% academic scholarship, but still wasn't enough because it's still too expensive. So I was going to go to Graveney in Tooting. So my mum moved house to be near the school. Because at that point, Balham had come up and was like posh now. So we sold a little 2-bed garden flat and got a little 2.5-bed house in Tooting, which was literally a 10-minute walk from the school. But little did she know that my dad had been doing these kind of unilateral secret negotiations with Dulwich College and had convinced them to take his income into account, and he was broke. So then they've come up with like an 85% bursary. Wow. So then he comes to me and goes, I can afford to send you to that school. Do you want to go? And I'm like, what, the one with all the turrets, like Harry Potter's, like Hogwarts? And he was like, yeah, do you want to go? And I was like, yeah, of course I want to go. And then he marched me to my mum and was like, so Christopher's decided that he'd like to go to Dulwich College. So my mum was screwing, obviously, because he played it so well that like now if she was going to say no, then she was going to be the bad girl. And, you know, he kind of engineered it. So she was like, well, I'm not paying for it. So like, if you're going to pay for it, then that's on you. Even the fee that was significantly reduced, she's like, I'm not paying for that. So there you go. So then I went from being a 10-minute walk from school to being an hour and 5-10-minute bus ride from like the Mitcham side of Tooting through Streatham, Tulse Hill, and coming out the other end. So I didn't really appreciate that until I ended up having to start making the commute. I think she came with me till I was about 12 or 13. And then I started making my way to school. So then I went to Dulwich College and I had a great education, and, you know, academically I did really well.
What was your subjects? Like, what did you really enjoy?
I was always drawn to humanities. I always hated science and maths. Were the things I found the most difficult and the least interesting. And I gravitated towards history, English, religious studies, logic and critical thinking. And I actually did A-levels in philosophy of religion and ethics, English, history, and French. So that was what I ended up focusing most of my time on.
And what was like teenage Chris like outside of school?
I mean, teenage Chris was angry, man. He was an angry dude. He was isolated geographically, isolated with no brothers and sisters, isolated financially, because he was like, from you know, like my mum never had like money, but like we weren't like breadline. But you go to that school, suddenly like you're one of the poor kids. So that was kind of like difficult. And you know, when you're 11 or 12, like kids are just all about what they have. I've got this, I've got that, I've got the newest this, I've got the newest that. And like, I couldn't believe it. Like, winter season, everyone had like £150 hockey sticks, hockey kit, hockey boots, hockey shoes, the bag that's made for the hockey stuff. And then the next turn rolls around and like, boom, now it's like we've all got cricket whites and like we've got the boots and the pads and the bat. And I'm like, it's like £1,000 worth of kit for you to, for your kid to have their own cricket stuff or whatever. So I was just a bit like, I was just blown away by it all. I remember.
How did you feel seeing it?
I was a bit astonished initially. What really blew my mind was, do you remember when the iPod Nano came out? The first one.
I still got one.
Mind blowing, right? Because obviously the iPod was a pretty amazing thing, but then when the Nano came out, and I remember I saw an advert for it, and then the next day I came to school, kid had it around its neck, and I was like, how? It's just come out. Like, we can never afford things when they just come out. Like, that's when people get mugged off because they pay.
You felt astonished.
I couldn't believe it. I was like, who are these kids? And then you feel kind of, you feel isolated, or you feel kind of separate from that. But I guess to answer the crux of your question, very quickly, relatively quickly, I think, definitely by the time I was about 14, 15, I stopped trying to fit in with these kids or be liked by these kids, and I started to define myself against these kids. So I was like, I took back control. I was like, okay, you don't respect me or like me because I'm not like you in these ways. Cool, I'm gonna like celebrate not being like you in these ways. How
did that celebration manifest? How would you celebrate?
Well, one thing that kind of became quite pivotal and obviously influenced a lot of things following that is I did martial arts when I was younger, but then I stopped when I was 11. And then at 15, I started it again. But I picked like, I did like Chinese martial arts before, like similar to Wushu, which is like, it's quite spiritual. Unless you get really good at it, you're probably not going to be able to use it very well. And then I just was like, what's like the baddest thing I can think of? And it was like kickboxing, because I'd watch Kickboxer with Jean-Claude Van Damme. I was like, I want to do that.
Is that Bloodsport?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, Bloodsport, Kickboxer, two films that I shouldn't have been. Again, at Auntie Avis's house, my mum would never have let me go near that. But the boys there were like, do you want to watch this? I was like, yeah. It was like an 18. I was like, it's an 18.
You got the brain.
You know what I mean? I was 10 and I got to watch an 18. So, but yeah, I started kickboxing when I was 15, and it quite quickly became like competitive kickboxing with like sparring and contact. And then it was all like calisthenics. And then again, I was training with like, I think I was like one of the only white guys there. And all the coaches were like big, tough, muscular, powerful West Indian men. I just grew up thinking like white masculinity is kind of puny, man. Like, where's the wicked badass white dudes? Like, I don't see them. Do you know what I mean? And like,
so to cut you, that feels like, as you describe your school, like being like, this is who I don't want to be like, and I don't fit in, and I don't identify. Then the house that you would chill at, and then you describe where you're doing the martial art, the kickboxing, like just worlds apart. And then you mentioned about the different, where is this white masculinity?
Yeah, I think one thing that I can recognise is that I did straddle quite a few worlds growing up. My mum was involved in arts. All her friends were white middle class, like not moneyed white middle class, but intellectual white middle class. Artists, photographers, thinkers who'd sit there, and, So and I'd see them, because obviously I didn't have any friends, so I didn't have any brothers or sisters. I didn't have any friends. So these lot were at my house. It wasn't like, I'm going down the park to play football with, like, we didn't live near no one. I didn't have any brothers and sisters. So I would associate with these adults, and I kind of thought that was normal. So there's like, I've got like the uber intellectual tranche of like the middle class artists. Then I've got like the moneyed school kids. Then I've got the hard ass kickboxers. Then I've got the kids who are on my bus when I'm going to and from school. And then there's like a few other smatterings of social groups, right? So all in all, there's a kind of a variety there. But one thing that I do remember quite distinctly as being a bit slightly seminal was our kids used to get robbed. So when I was 11 years old, mobile phones hit. Suddenly everyone had a mobile phone.
Yeah.
And I didn't have one straight away, but I got one for Christmas one year. I got like a little Motorola flip phone. But this is like Nokia 3210, Snake, Nokia 3310.
Yeah.
And basically, everyone suddenly overnight became a target for not just their lunch money, but they probably had something in their pocket that was worth 100, 150 quid. So we were walking around with our, Dulwich College uniforms, which just look like big dollar signs.
Yeah.
Because like most of those kids were gonna have phones, and they were gonna have like the nice phone that their mummy and daddy had bought them. So that meant a lot of unwanted attention on that 201 bus or on that P13 bus that I was taking.
Wow,
P13.
Okay. So you're travelling through the trenches.
Well, it was the 201 that used to go through the estates off Tulse Hill.
Yeah.
And I got some, another time there's some funny stories about that, but essentially, when everyone got mobile phones, everyone became a target, and some of our kids were getting robbed, and actually one of our prefects got stabbed by kids from another school that we talked about just before. I remember I walked into the assembly and the kind of headmaster was like, I've got some very grave news to share. One of our boys has been stabbed, he stabbed at West Dulwich train station, he's in the hospital, blah, blah, blah. And we just want to say, boys, that, if somebody comes to you and asks for your phone, just give it to them. Just give it to them. It's not worth your life, just whatever they ask, just give it to them. And I remember at that time, and I thought, thinking about it now, you can't really fault the school for saying that, whatever. Like, if they'd have said something different, they probably would have got a lot of flack for it.
Right.
But in my head, I was like, you're teaching us two things here. Firstly, that we are lambs to the slaughter. And secondly, that don't worry, money can fix it. Don't worry about your things that are yours that, somebody may have worked hard to pay for. If poorer people ask for it, just give it to them, because you can just get another one. It's probably insured anyway. Or daddy probably gets it through his company. And I remember thinking that, and I thought, nah, I'm not growing up like that. I'm not having that. If people, my stuff is my stuff.
Yeah.
Because my mum worked hard for that. I'm not just getting a new one if someone takes it. If you want to take my stuff, you're going to have to take it from me. I'm not going to give it to you. And I remember thinking, in that assembly, I was like, these kids aren't like me. This place, I don't believe in this.
Yeah.
These values, I don't believe in them.
I'm also, I don't feel like I belong here.
Yeah, I didn't belong there.
Yeah.
I didn't belong there. I didn't have a lot of friends at school. I had a handful that I'm still friends with now. Needless to say, that none of them were white.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, you ask how does little teenage Chris celebrating his difference look like? I was hostile. I was actively hostile. I didn't wait for people to take the piss out of me. I was gone. I didn't want to be involved in your stuff.
You was on the offense.
I was guard up.
Yeah.
I was kind of ready for any, but it wasn't. There was no risks of violence. That school, if you push someone, you get suspended. But it was I think the combination of the way I needed to be to get to school and to not have my stuff taken from me. I just carried it. When I was at school, I kind of just carried that on.
Yeah.
I wasn't worrying about any physical threat to me. I was just kind of I was just still in my shell, basically. So I didn't try to integrate.
Yeah.
And I actually, I didn't have a great time, to be honest with you. I bonded more with the teachers than I did with the other kids, because I recognised that the quality of teaching was outstanding.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is amazing. These teachers go above and beyond. But I think it actually made life easier for me, because by the time I was in my mid-20s, I wasn't worrying about what anybody else thought or what anybody else did. And some people I knew, particularly people I'd met from university, were suddenly in their mid to late 20s, having kicked off on a graduate scheme somewhere, had walked into life in the slipstream of what they were supposed to do.
Right.
And were sitting there thinking, I don't know if I want to do this. But that was such a radical thought to them. And to change path would mean disappointing people maybe, or being open to criticism or being judged. And they were terrified of it. And a lot of them just
crumbled,
hunkered down. They just didn't go anywhere. They just stayed in their path. And years later, I'd find out that, you know, they'd had a bit of a breakdown, or they'd quit, you know, in a moment of just like, whatever. And I think being the outsider from when I was young taught me that you don't have to do what people expect you to do. And I actually think that was really quite valuable.
That's profound.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, I love how you said that, just how you summarised that right at the end about other people's thoughts. And I'm wondering, once you finished university, what was like the world like for Chris? Because there's almost this moment where they try to write you off from being a child, right? You've got this woman who's fought for you. You know, she's not a boxer, she's not into martial arts, but she fought for you, and she won that fight. And then you're in these different education spaces, and you're thriving. The environment maybe doesn't feel great, but you're thriving. You go to uni, you do what you do, and you, like, there's an appetite for academia. Like, you know, the tutors that the teachers that you say, this is quality teaching. So you connect with the teachers, you go uni, you see how everyone else who maybe is not experienced what you've experienced are kind of like folding and crumbling, if I can use that as a term. But what was life like after coming out of university? Like, tell us about that stage of your life.
Well, I felt pretty optimistic at that point in my life, I think. I'd boxed all through university as an amateur and enjoyed it and represented the school and like won some stuff, which doesn't mean that much, to be honest, in the boxing framework, but it felt nice at the time. And I'd graduated top of department.
Yeah, come on.
I didn't get a first. I got a really high 2-1 and it was top of department. And I remember thinking, no one got a first. What department is this? How have I come top? Because I worked hard, but I could have worked a lot harder.
Yeah.
And I spent most of my time in the boxing gym. So like university for me was navigating a couple of relationships that I was in at the time and boxing. And then I did the course. So I was like, if I've come top, then like, I don't feel like the caliber of the competition was that high, because I feel like people should have done better than me, because some brainy kid should have done better than me. Do you know what I mean? Some like book smart, all he does is study kid. But it didn't happen. So that made me feel like either the competition's not strong or I'm better than I thought I was. Which, you know, I didn't know which one it was. But it felt like it was either way. I was like, going into work, I was like, you're one of the best of this crop. So that's probably quite a good sign. And I was clear that I didn't want to go into business. I didn't want to make somebody else money. I didn't want to come home at the end of my week, my month, my year, my life and say the sum total of my activities was I helped someone else's P&L.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have impact. I'd kind of seen there was a lot of inequality in the world. I'd understood quite early that, you know, how some people live is a world apart from people who live 2 streets away. And I wanted to try and do something about that. I knew I didn't want to go into government because I thought that was corrupt. So I thought, okay, well, the charity sector, like, what could you do then? So I'd set my sights on working for the UN. That was what I thought was like the pinnacle of like the charity sector, right? Because it's kind of prestigious, it's international. They're like big punches, you know, they're on big stages that, you know, they matter. And I got a job I got hired as a consultant, which then led to a job for a big international foundation, which was like an American donor. and they were giving, you probably know them, the Soros Foundation, Society Foundation.
George,
man, like Big George. Big George.
Come on.
Yeah, he's worth, I don't know, what, 25 billion now?
Yeah.
It's like 88 or something. So yeah, Hungarian Jew who you know, survived the war, went to America, made his fortune. And that foundation was giving away, at the time I was there, $1 billion a year across 70 countries with 2,000 staff. So they're like a big player. And I went and worked there without really having a clue what I was doing. I worked for the Youth Initiative. Wow. I had no direct supervisor in my London office. I was managed directly out of New York by a very eccentric guy called Noel, who frankly didn't know what I was doing most of the time. And I used to just ball into rooms, drop my own Society Foundation business card on the table. Everyone was like, oh yeah, so Chris, what do you think about this? What do you think? Because I'm the money, right? I'm the guy that signs the checks, so I represent the guy that signs the checks. So that was great. That was like a real ego boost. And I was like, you know, you're 23, I was flying all over the world, having a great time in every way you can imagine, going into these cool rooms, staying in these cool hotels, expense, corporate credit card. And I did that for, 18 months. And then I was like, I don't actually know what I'm really talking about. And no one's called me on it. So maybe this isn't the right thing for you. Because this is actually just a little bit of a political back-scratching game. Like, I found out that we were funding the European Youth Parliament to the tune of like 100 grand a year, when the mission of the business of the department I was in, which was the youth department, was supposed to be working with marginalised migrant and minority young people. And I didn't understand how the European Youth Parliament, which is basically a training ground for like white privileged future politicians, deserved 100 grand of our money. And then I was like, yeah, but we give them this, and then they give us, And I was like, that's how it works.
That's all right, son.
So I was like, nah, it's just politics again, so I'm punching out. So I left. And I went and worked for an organisation that could have been one of our grantees, like a local grassroots organisation that was doing kind of what I thought was really impactful work with young people. So I went to work at essentially a PRU. It was an alternative education provider, but it worked with the same kids in Tottenham called the Boxing Academy. So that was my kind of transition away from my dream. But to be honest, by that point, I was already clear that I was going to do boxing because I'd met some people, I'd been introduced to a pro coach, God knows why, and he kind of told me I could maybe do something. So towards the back end of my time at Open Society Foundation, I was going for meetings twice a week at the boxing gym, training with the pros, getting smashed up, going back to work. People looking at me a bit funny, like, you look a little bit different than when you left a few hours ago. I'd be like, fell over, banged my head, whatever. So I already knew that I was exiting that vision of my goals. I wasn't going to go and work for the UN. I wasn't going to go and be a charity, aficionado. Didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that boxing was going to take me the next step.
Curiosity, who is your favourite boxer, or because it might have changed, I don't know. Who was your favourite boxer then?
I think the boxer that influenced me the most, both in the style that I had at the time, the mindset, I feel like you've got an idea. Who are you going to guess? It's a very obvious one. It's not very obscure. And the way you
British or American?
American.
I don't know.
You gotta give me. I don't have a thought in my head about it. Era 80s, 90s, noughties, 80s,
80s, 90s,
80s, 90s, middleweight,
welter, not a welter,
heavyweight. Mike.
Iron Mike.
It's so obvious, right?
Yeah.
The way you were looking at me, I thought it was on the tip of your tongue.
No, I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't even have like an inkling. So Mike, is he still your?
Yeah, for real. But for different reasons.
Yeah.
I don't know if you followed him in recent years, the kind of journey that he's been on.
Yeah.
Therapeutically, in terms of the way that he's evolved and the way that he now talks about his younger self. But at the time, I was in love with him because he was the most destructive puncher that the sport had ever seen, and he was, a psychological master of warfare. At the time, we didn't know it was an act. Subsequently, we found out that there was a lot of training that went into that. But You know, when I was growing up, I was just like, that man is scary.
What's one memory that rings out for you when it comes to boxing, like being a pro boxer?
I mean, that's a tough question. You want a good one or a bad one?
Whatever's real to you, man. Whatever's real to you.
Oh man. So like, my tendency is always to go dark, but on this one up, I'm gonna go to the light, which is a very, very strong memory. Was the night of my pro debut, and I guess it does have a bit of dark in it actually, because I was actually on the bill with Dylan White, who's now like megastar, but he just done a drugs ban, so he was coming back, and he done another drugs ban, not the one he's just doing now, but like he'd been banned for ephedrine, so he was on a comeback, and he was on a small hall show with my promoter, right? Because he obviously belongs on TV, but he was on a small show with me, and we'd basically sold all the tickets. So the promoter was like, right, you lot are going last, and he shifted the fight order like on the night. So I was wrapped, gloved, and ready to go like 2 hours before I actually was supposed to go on. So I have a really strong memory of sitting in the change rooms, just like having like a mental battle for about 2 hours. Because I was convinced that like I was going to go out there and I was going to be exposed, and it was going to be proved that I had no business there. That I did all right, and as amateurs unlicensed, but this is pro boxing. You're going to get sparked, you're going to get humiliated, and that to this day is probably one of the most, if not the most, definitely the most easy to explain example of a mental battle that I have fought on the battleground of my mind in a specific time period for 2 hours, to then arrive at a conclusion and to arrive at a way of making peace with what was about to happen, and a way of going into it free from as much fear as possible. So that's one memory, and then the other memory is just walking out and just getting hit by like a wall of noise. Like, it was only a small venue, there must have been 1,000 people there. Wow. But like, it was like, I was just like, my walkout tune came on.
What was your walkout tune?
Come on.
Oh mate, do you know what? It was something so obscure because it's something that I'd been training to.
Okay.
And I have to get back to you on it.
All right, no worry.
It was Bashment though.
Yeah.
And it was like Bashment electro remix.
Wow.
It was like some really like aggy, fast-paced Bashment lyrics on like a kind of electro thumping beat.
Okay.
It was a banger.
When that bell went for the first round, your first pro fight,
Yeah.
what can you remember?
I'll tell you what I remember. Like, as soon as the bell, like, you're nervous as hell in the corner.
Yeah.
It's like probably the worst bit. Like, you're in the ring, you've scoped out the opponent. I always like to run a lap of the ring. So I jog around the ring right as close as I can to the other guy.
Okay.
So if he's standing in his corner, I'll almost brush him as I run past him. Almost like he's not
part
there.
Of your strategy.
Yeah, just like you're not here. I own all of this. I'm not respecting your little corner. I'm going to run right up into your corner. Yeah. So you do that, and you sort of look like you're sort of ready to rumble. Then you go back to your corner, and you're like, you got all the butterflies, and you're palpitating. As soon as the bell goes, you just calm right down. Like, you just, everything gets much quieter. All your senses turn up. You become very, very... I was really good at... Well, I don't know if I was good at it. Easy for me to hear my corner. So I could hear them like... It's almost like they were like on a megaphone in my ear. And I could hear the crowd, but like I was able to hone in on that. And I remember I went out of the gates a bit quick, and I walked straight into 2 hard right hands.
To the face?
Yeah, on the jaw. And I was like, oh, like, they hurt more than... they should do, but it's because you're in 10-ounce gloves, right? So I'd never been hit with a 10-ounce glove. I'd only ever been hit with like your 16-ounce sparring glove. So you get hit bosh on the chin, like flush, because obviously you're running into it because you're like a bit too hyped up. And I remember my voice just being like, settle down, Chris, settle down, just calm down, don't embarrass yourself. And then from then on it went well.
And that feeling when you won that first fight, what was that? Like not the thoughts, but just the feelings that ran through your body.
Relief. So much relief. Because it took me a year and a half of living, training full time as a professional to make it to that day. I'd had licensing issues. I'd had health problems. I'd had so many things. At one point, the entire goal was to make it to the pro debut. That was it. That was it. Like in my head, in a way I got through some situations I was in was, you're not quitting until you get your night. So that was almost, it was done at that point. Like I won my first pro fight with a shutout victory, won every round. Should have stopped the guy, didn't, because I wasn't experienced enough to spot when he was hurt, but looked good, performed in front of my fans. I was like, relief, total relief. I was like, you've made it. Not because you're going to go anywhere else necessarily, but you've made it.
That's really powerful though, because you said, I'm not quitting until I get my night. And I think for a viewer or a listener or someone, you know, that could be really encouraging and inspirational. So, like, you know... Yeah.
How long did you box for then?
As a pro, like, very, very short time. Like, I was working and coaching full time. So coaching was my job. So I had no other job other than coaching, boxing and training from May 2013 until I hung it up in the beginning of 2016. Okay. So like barely 3 years, not even 3 years. And during that time, I was able to be active for 6 months. And that's it.
What does boxing mean to you?
Boxing for me was at the time, and I believe is for many people, a vehicle to know yourself better.
Okay.
And that was all I was ever interested in, really. Yeah. What drove me to box, to fight, to test myself was doubt. Doubt in myself. Yeah. And I wanted to know what I could take and what I was capable of. And I had all these ideas in my head that, oh, maybe you're this, maybe you're just that. Maybe you tell yourself this, but maybe you're not. And boxing was how I answered those questions for myself.
I've had a good friend of mine, someone I used to work with, was a prize fighter. Shout out to Pete Cam. He over 50-something fights. But the conversations we used to have, his came from a place of, I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying that, but he had a title of this book. He said if he was to write the book in relation to his career and what it meant to him, his strap line was fighting to forget. You know what I mean? Because as you rightly say, I know, having sparred alongside with Dillian myself, I know that it is something when it comes to fighting and pitting your wits against the next person. It gives you such an insight into your own psyche, into your own heart, into your own being. That who am I truly? Who am I? Because when you're faced, because that's the thing. We talk about team sports, individual sports. Ain't nobody else in that ring with you. You know what I mean? And it really gives you an insight into who you truly are. And that's what I get. The sense I get today is, you're telling us who you are, where you've come from. I mean, it's so powerful to really hear your story and how far you have come. Because I also know that when you're talking about that 4 or 5-year-old and that anger, I think, martial arts and, then boxing gave you that outlet in which to release a lot of those feelings. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And that was actually why my mum went and found martial arts that I could do, because she was like, this kid has so much energy that if it's not channeled in the right way, it will almost certainly end up being destructive. Like I loved, sticks and guns, and all my toys were like weapons, you know what I mean? So she was the one who spotted that. And I think one thing I say to people is like, I've worked with amateurs and I've worked with pros. Since I've retired, I've worked with kind of boxers at all levels. And one thing that is different, I think, is when you're young, or when you're starting, I should say, it's an outlet. Because you're not trying to be that good at it necessarily. Like, you just want to like hit stuff, and it's an outpouring.
Tell me about it.
And you just want to like, just let it out. And then the better you get, the less of that you get. Discipline like locks itself onto you like chains, to the point where once you get to, and then when you make it your living, there's very little freedom now, because it's your job. So you get up and train when you feel like it, you get up and train when you don't. You hit the bag when you feel like it, you hit the bag when you don't. So what happens is you end up becoming more and more focused on the detail. I remember listening to Kobe Bryant talk about the monotony of just like those incremental gains. Like you can't be a fan of the sport anymore to a certain degree. You have to become a master of it. So once you become professional at what you do, it's not so much in the camp of like it being an outlet anymore, because it becomes a duty. And like duty's kind of the opposite of outlet, right? Outlet's like spontaneity and freedom, and duty's like manacles and shackles. But I think in a fight you get it, and you probably get it in sparring. It's probably the closest you get it, right? There's sparring where you're supposed to be working on something, and there's sparring where maybe you're supposed to be working on something but you just feel like doing X instead, so that's what you do. But when it comes to fight night, you want to obviously make sure that you win rounds. You want to make sure you don't get hit, you don't expose yourself to stupid shots. So it's very focused, very disciplined, very focused, very disciplined. But then you get, sometimes, if you win fight by stoppage, you end up with these little windows. And the one moment you can let loose a little bit is when you can see that the guy's hurt. Because suddenly you've gone from dealing with someone who's fully equipped and fully threatening to maybe someone who has half of their faculties, or maybe less. And at that moment, look, the Watson Eubank fight is an example that it doesn't necessarily mean that when someone's hurt, you can go steaming into them, because that's exactly what Watson did to Eubank, and that's why he ended up getting hit with that uppercut that changed his life. But generally speaking, when someone's hurt and you can see it, you can let loose a little bit more. And that's when you can really see who you are as a person. Because if someone's hurt and you see that they're hurt, and you get a thrill inside and a little burst of euphoria, and you want to go in there and do maximal damage to them, you can't lie to yourself about that. You can't pretend that that's not what you thought or not what you felt. No one else is ever going to know, but you know. And equally, if you see that someone's hurt and a little part of you goes, oh, I should stop, then you also know that about your character, and you know that about yourself. So like, fighting delivers ultimate self-knowledge. Both as the distributor of violence and also as the receiver of violence.
Well said.
That's powerful summary, man. I'm just wondering, as we kind of come into like the latter end, who would you say you are now?
That's a good question, man. Well, I'm a father now. I have a 2-year-old daughter, and I'm a partner now. I've been with my partner for 6 years, which is the longest I've ever been with anyone. And those two things, I think, temper and also sometimes distract you from the pursuit in the absolute of like who I am. Because your understanding of yourself is no longer like a singular unit. Like, you now have to be multiple things for multiple people. So I think I'm an absolutist, right? I'm an extremist. I'm a black or white, I'm all in or not in at all kind of guy. And my idea of self used to be myself as this kind of unit. But now I'm this kind of diluted, hybrid. Part of me's a father, part of me's a partner, part of me's a coach, part of me's a retired fighter, part of me's a jiu-jitsu practitioner, part of me is a motorbike rider. And I have this fragmented sense of self now, which I use the word fragmented because I think it is currently fragmented. I don't think I've brought it all together yet. I don't think I've like sewn all the pieces of the puzzle together neatly into this beautiful tapestry. But I think that's the work of your 30s and 40s. I hope that is anyway. Like, I think it's good not to be one-dimensional. It's good to have many strings to your bow. It's good to have many passions. It's good to be able to be many things for many people in many contexts. I think, I'm going through there's some stuff going on, there's like a legal case and a few other things that are going on in my life at the moment which are a bit messy.
Okay.
And I think when things are messy, that can be an impediment to the weaving of the tapestry. But I am confident that on the other side of the battles that I am currently facing, I will emerge victorious.
Come on, you touch me on that.
You will. Like that first fight. You've been there before.
I will not be beaten.
Yeah, you've been
I will
there
not
before.
be beaten.
You know what? It's funny as you're talking, like, there are different types of rings. You've got the actual ring that you were fighting in, and you took those two jabs to the chin or punches to the chin, and your arm was raised victorious in that ring. But the things that you would have learned, gleaned, taken on, the training, the principles, when you said discipline locks onto you like chains, to the things that you would have learned, like, not just for the ring, right? And they prepare you for other fights. And yeah, man, I say this, like, I only met you, this is the first time meeting you. We've had that conversation prior, like, I can see you being victorious, man. And I would dare to say, I feel I can, that I don't think it's a diluted version. Like, just from my perspective, my humble perspective, I feel like you're tapping into different facets and abilities and characteristic traits that you have. And it's almost like a buffet, It's that carvery. It's that Oriental buffet that we go to. Like, there are options, and I said this in another episode, and I'm aware that that's how you see it at the moment. But I just feel like to speak into that, like Jay-Z says that we're not blessed with the disease of being able to do one thing, and I was like, wow.
And to add to that, because when you said that, I said, yeah, I can hear the fragmentation, but at the same time, a lot of those different facets enable you to be fitly joined together.
Yeah.
Fitly joined together, because you're just not the boxer. You're not just the dad. You're not just the son. They are those different components that have knitted together to sit before us today as the man you are, so articulate and passionate about what you do, and that's the sense that I get. That listen, we not putting the time frame on this thing, but what was it? A couple of weeks ago, reached out to you, and you said, "Yeah, come on, man." I'm not someone with a good heart or open heart to want to help others, and that's the sense that I get from Little Chris. You've always wanted to be, and just getting my thoughts together, something that was perhaps something that wasn't communicated, that I heard was love. You had the love of mom and dad, but you witnessed that love from others in real time when You know, it was Auntie Avis and Uncle, what's his name?
Huey, yeah.
Yeah, Huey. Love that, man. That sounds like a sitcom already, you know? Yeah. But, yeah, I mean, you know, I just want to applaud you and thank you so much for coming at such a, you know, not much time given, and just agreeing to come on the green sofa, and just share your testimony, man.
You got to take opportunities.
Yeah.
You got to be open, man.
Yeah,
you got to be open to things, unless you think you have it all figured out, which I don't.
Yeah.
Anyone at any time can come and provide you with answers that you didn't know you were looking for.
Right.
And I would dare to say you are the tapestry.
Yeah.
As Doc, you were talking about knitting and you're the tapestry in real time. It's happening in real time. And I think that's really, really important, man, just to share that with you. Is there anything that you would like our listeners or viewers to know? If there's anything that you would like to share with them, whether some words of encouragement. I think people are going to be encouraged anyway, but there's anything that might be on your heart, you know, you think could be helpful.
There's something actually that's on my mind at the moment, because it's the result of something I put on social media I think a day ago. And I've had some really interesting messages from people since, and it kind of relates to what we're talking about. Do you remember that Winston Churchill quote about the Second World War? If you're going through hell, just keep going.
Yeah.
And obviously he's talking about like making sure that you don't give up and let the Nazis invade England, but it's a quote which has in the past engendered mixed feelings with me, because the extremist in me likes it. I'm like, you're walking through hell, just let it burn you and keep going. Like, become the flames. Just stop caring and just move through it. And there's definitely times I've done that.
Right.
But also, something I thought about recently was, if you're going through something that's really, really difficult and you're putting yourself through it because you think you have to, because you're telling yourself you need to, because if you don't, it means you're this or you're that, it's okay to just be like, this hurts too much. I'm going to step out of these flames.
That's it.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
I shared this on social media and I had some very interesting responses from people where there's a lot of mixed views about it. And what I found was the people who typically walk through the flames wish that they sometimes gave themselves permission not to. And the people who turn back from the flames wish that they sometimes push through.
Yeah. Powerful.
There it is.
Powerful.
I think, you know, it's only a few people, you know, I share this with, but I think, you know, because listeners will know, you know, Brother C, how I encourage, cajole G.
I knew that was coming. I knew
how
it.
he should be a therapist himself. You have the hallmarks of it.
Yeah.
You have the hallmarks of it. I don't know if it's you know, here's the thing. You probably are familiar with this, but there's something about opportunities, right? And the lifetime of an opportunity can run out, yeah? Don't miss your opportunity, because you could do some amazing work as a therapist.
That's very kind of you. I take that as a big compliment coming from you guys.
Yeah. Bless you, man.
Thank you.
And then just the last question,
Yes.
because we ask everyone this, and I think it's really important. When it's all said and done, not from a morbid perspective, when you go to a gravesite, you see a tombstone, normally you have the name, date of birth, date of death of the individual, but there's a little line between date of birth and date of death, and that little line we call living in a dash, and that little line represents our lives while we are alive, which lives on when we're no longer here. What would you like your little line to represent?
I'd like it to... If someone was going to say something about me that represented my entire life, that was that dash, maybe it could be something like, gave us permission to be whoever we were.
Mic drop. Gave us permission to be who we were. Someone needed to hear that.
Yeah, 100.
Someone needs permission. They need to give themselves permission.
Yes.
To free themselves. On that note, sometimes when they put up an Instagram post and it's like no caption, that was a no caption.
Yeah.
So listeners, viewers, on that note, we just want to say thank you for rocking to the end of the episode with us. Rich with nuggets, truth, honesty. I want to say, Chris, thank you for being with us and sharing the truths. And we're rooting for you. We're rooting for you. And if we can support in any way, please let us know. Listeners, viewers, till the next episode, you know what we say in the words of Curtis Mayfield: keep on keeping on.
Peace.
Thanks, guys.